A woman from Shandong named Winway found something strange after taking out 50,000 yen from the bank on August 27, 2024. She learned that $30,000 of that was fake money. The fake money was 3 different colors and was meant to be used to pay her staff. She saw that only the first bill in one of the piles was real when she looked more closely. The rest were marked as special bill counting competition practice vouchers. These are just practice items that bank workers use to get better at counting bills. They don't have any value. On the flip side, subscribing to the channel does have value, so if you haven't already, please consider doing so. In return, we'll do our best to bring you the latest global economy news. Winway told the police about the trouble so they could figure it out. However, the China Postal Savings Bank said they were not guilty and that they could not give customers practice coupons. The cops have said they will look into it more. Even though the bank said it wasn't true, reporters found that Winway wasn't the only one who had these practice coupons. An old man in Tianjin had a similar situation earlier this year. When he went to a store to spend 100 yen, he found that the 400 yen that were left over were fake. When he went back to the bank, the staff gave him the same story, saying that since the bank's money goes through machines, it couldn't have practice coupons in it. They said it was possible that the money had been traded after he left the bank. Chinese media thought that the old man's withdrawal might have only had one real bill, the 100 yen he spent. The other bills were probably practice coupons. The problem wasn't seen until he tried to use the cash because he didn't check the money before going. Some bad news about banks in China has been coming out in the news lately. Folks in Guri County, Hunan, took to the streets to protest against the local farm bank from August 27th to August 29th. They were mad that they couldn't get their cash out of the bank. It turned out that their money was used to pay for a housing project. When the real estate company failed, they lost their money. The bank didn't want to take responsibility, and it was hard for the people to get justice in court. You can hear the angry villagers chanting, "Apologize, Agricultural Bank," outside the bank in videos that have been shared online. In the video, one woman was very angry and said, "They're making money while we fight for our rights. This agricultural bank stole all of our money and won't pay us back." What a crazy idea. The agricultural bank did this. Who would have thought? No one saw this coming. Someone also spoke out and said that Li Jin, who was the head of the agricultural bank in Gai County, and others had stolen more than 100 million yen, or $14 million, from more than 200 clients. More protests happened because the bank wouldn't give any money in reparations. When depositors spoke out, the bank would call the cops to break up the crowds. The news outlets thought that the local government might be working with the bank. This is not the first time that the agricultural bank in Guri County has been blamed for doing bad things. In November 2012, 185 depositors said that the bank had taken public accounts without permission, which cost them a total of 87 million yen, or about $1 million. In Chungju on August 5th, a man posted a video online after having a bad time with a Bank of China ATM. He put money into his account, but it didn't show up. The people at the bank told him that the ATM might have become stuck, which is a rare problem that could take a few days to fix. It might take even longer if the machine was being fixed. He got angry with the staff and said, "I need the money now." He was pretty stressed out. "I no longer want to pay it. Please return my cash." The bank staff told him they couldn't just give the money back because it had already been placed. Instead, they told him to see if he could get a loan in case he needed the money right away. They didn't agree with this idea, and he later told the media that it took 2 whole days for the deposit to show up in his account. A lot of people talked about this event online, Some people thought it was funny and said, "Hey, the deposit didn't go through. Let's give them a loan." Some people were afraid that these kinds of events would make people not trust banks at all. There has always been trouble with banks. A lot of small banks have said that up to 40% of their loans are bad debts, and more of their branches are closing. It was 30.4% more than this time last year. But by the end of May 2024, 257 bank locations had closed. Many of these businesses shut down were rural commercial banks and rural credit institutions, which together made up 42% and 21% of the businesses that shut down. Also, branches of 16 foreign banks and 5 country cooperative banks were closed. Because of this, fewer new banks are starting, and more than 60 rural banks in China have closed or merged since the beginning of 2024. Only 894 new bank stores opened in the first 5 months of this year. It looks like the banking industry is having a hard time. China's banks are having a hard time, and it's not just because branches are closing. One big problem is that debts are getting bigger, mostly because real estate companies went bankrupt. The real estate market was a big part of China's economy for 20 years, adding between 23% and 30% to the country's growth. However, things went badly when the Chinese government stopped giving real estate companies easy loans around 2021. The housing market dropped sharply after this change, and some well-known developers went bankrupt or had to restructure. According to experts, the real estate market is now a big drag on the economy. It used to help the economy grow and make middle-class people rich. People thought their money was safe when they put it in banks, but these banks put those savings into real estate deals that were risky. People who have saved money or made small investments are now realizing that their money has been stuck in risky investments. Let us look at Evergrande, a very large real estate company in China. It defaulted even though it had assets worth trillions of dollars. It ran out of cash. As you can see, having a lot of goods doesn't always mean you have enough cash flow. Banks may have valuable assets, but they only keep about 1% of savings, or 3 trillion yen, as cash on hand for everyday transactions. Banks use the rest of the savings to make money by investing them in different things. China's banking problems are getting worse, in part because the government is issuing so many bonds. These notes are often worth trillions of dollars, which makes banks less liquid. To give you an idea, local governments are short on cash because the real estate bubble burst, property values dropped, and land couldn't be sold. They are counting on the central government to borrow a lot of money. Banks have to buy these government bonds, which uses up their cash savings and limits the amount of money that can be withdrawn or sent. YouTube financial commentator Cold Eye has said that China's economic slump seems unstoppable and has no end in sight. China usually has its best quarter in the second, but this year's numbers are not looking good. The GDP grew by only 4.7% in the second quarter, which was less than what was expected. Retail sales only grew by 2% in June, which was the lowest growth rate since February 2023. This shows that domestic demand is weakening. Consumer spending is slow, and even though May brought the biggest real estate stimulus package ever, home prices fell to their lowest level in 9 years in June. Smaller area banks are also being hit hard by the problems in the real estate market. Lynette is a senior fellow at the Center for China Analysis at the Asia Society Policy Institute. She says that China's 3,800 small regional banks in rural areas are its weaker financial links. These are credit unions, commercial banks in cities, and commercial banks in rural areas. These smaller banks are much less safe than bigger ones, even though they hold about 13% of all bank assets. A lot of their debt is linked to real estate, and they're in a tough spot because they can only take deposits from people in their own area. They can't have branches in other provinces or serve customers who are listed in other provinces. Because small banks are limited, they often work with the government to give money to real estate projects and developers. They are now at risk because of this exposure in the current real estate problem. Lynette says that when the Chinese economy is doing well, the government supports the growth of local banks to make it easier for people to get loans. It doesn't take long to set up these banks, but important things like company governance and reserve requirements are often overlooked. When the economy slows down, it's up to the people who oversee banks to fix things. People may move their money from smaller banks to bigger ones as consumer confidence drops. This could cause more small banks to fail. In turn, this leads to more loans, mergers, and government involvement. At the same time, city governments, which are already very busy, are having a hard time saving failing banks. Cold Eye, a financial analyst, says that China's real estate market is at a very important point. The price of homes is still going down, and the real crash may not be over yet. Chinese analyst Xu Chunggang calls this a slow-motion financial crisis that is being caused by the government getting involved a lot. The Chinese government is trying to keep the financial problem from getting worse quickly by controlling information, taking administrative steps, and other things. In the US, this kind of action would be against the law, but China's government has the power to handle the problem, even if it might just delay what needs to be done. The average Chinese person's income, on the other hand, has an effect on how banks work. People in China don't see their incomes improving at the same rate, even though the country has the world's second-largest economy. Because of changes in the economy and industries, many areas are in danger of going away, which means fewer job options and a higher chance of being laid off. Reuters says that this year, a record 11.8 million college grads are having a hard time finding work. A lot of people are losing their jobs in fields like banking, and companies like Tesla, IBM, and ByteDance have recently cut their staff. The rate of jobless in China is very high. The National Bureau of Statistics reported on August 16th that a 17.7% jobless rate for 16-24-year-olds working in cities and not in school was seen in July. It was 6.5% for people 25 to 29 years old and 3.9% for people 30 to 59 years old. This 17.7% rate for younger workers was much higher than the 13.3% rate the previous month. It was the highest level of unemployment since records began being kept in January. Analysts point out that this number doesn't include the millions of young people in rural areas who are out of work. Some young Chinese people who are having trouble finding work are using social media sites like Little Red Book to talk about their problems. With tags like unemployment diary and layoff, they write about their daily lives and the awkward times they've had with bosses. Some people even post teary selfies to show how hard things are for them. Getting steady, well-paying jobs is hard for a lot of people, and some people are stuck in jobs with no chance of promotion or pay raise. To stay competitive in the job market, people have to spend a lot of time and money getting better at what they do. But this also means they have less money saved. Also, some companies are having such a hard time that they can't pay back their loans on time, which causes banks to have more loans that aren't being repaid. When banks have a lot of bad loans, they may need to set aside a lot of money to cover their losses. This cuts into their income and makes it harder for them to handle risk well. It might become harder for businesses to get new loans if banks raise the standards for loan approval. This is because of the rise in bad loans. This could stop businesses from growing and hurt the income in the area. It's especially tough because a lot of banks were created to help small companies, especially in China's poorer areas. If these banks have a lot of bad debt, they might not be able to give out new loans. This can hurt companies that are already struggling and slow down economic growth in the area even more. If China's method for saving banks fails, it could put the whole financial sector at risk, which could cause social unrest. It's possible that people and investors will start putting their money into real estate or investments in other countries. This could lead to economic chaos, more inequality, and higher unemployment. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, and its people have had a deal for a long time. People agreed to CCP rule in exchange for economic growth. However, this deal may be breaking down. The CCP is most worried about how the failure of small bad banks could affect the security of society. For example, in 2022, there was a big fraud scam at rural banks in Hunan that made it impossible for depositors to get their money. This made people protest in the streets for a solution. It is said that this event's social effects have been greater than its cash effects. Li Hongqing, a Chinese-American economist, says that there are more than 4,000 small and medium-sized banks in China that are like the Hunan banks, and that problems could happen in other places as well. China could be on the verge of its own Lehman Brothers moment, a reference to the financial crisis that began when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt in 2008. Cold Eye's research shows that China's real estate, debt, foreign trade, and industry all have sharp drops. The Chinese people are the ones who are really suffering from these failures. They are in a terrible position, with not much hope for getting better. Reports from the financial world say that China's economy is in one of the worst slumps it has seen in years.